Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's SharePoint TV show. Sorry for that small delay. We're just joking in the chat in the back for a little bit. Uh, in this week's SharePoint TV show, we're going to talk about a topic that's super popular those days, which is Microsoft Teams, with two amazing guests. Remember, especially for those of you that it's the first time joining us, the goal of this show is to get all of your questions answered. So if you have any questions, please ask them in the chat. But before we introduce our experts, let's take a look at a quick promo video from our sponsor, Valo Intranet. Okay, welcome back, everybody. So let's introduce our two experts. First of all, we have Matt Wade. How are you doing, Matt?
I'm doing well, Vlad. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much. And we also have Jamie LaPorte. How are you doing, Jamie? I think Jamie has froze a little bit. I'm looking here on the back end, or if not, she's really not moving at all. I don't know how she can do that. But oh, there we go. I think Jamie's
Okay,
back.
can you guys hear me?
Yes, we
It
can.
unexpectedly quit.
Oh,
sorry about
it's okay. Did you sacrifice a site collection or a virtual machine before for the demo got?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. Went down.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining us on the show. Jamie, can you do a quick introduction?
Of course. And thanks for having me. My name is Jamie. I'm a Office 365 architect with Protivity. So I've been kind of all over Office 365 within the past couple of years, and most recently focusing on Microsoft Teams, kind of around when it just came out, and then dabbling a little bit in Yammer too.
Ooh, Yammer.
The fun stuff.
This is going to be fun. I'm for sure going to bring that up a bit later. But other than that, Matt, I know you're really famous, especially for that periodic table that you proudly have printed behind you. But can you do a quick introduction about yourself? And by the way, for everybody that doesn't know, I've known Matt for a while, and I love to pick on him. We have this thing going on, so believe me, even if it looks mean, there's lots of love going on.
It's all love. It's Valo love, right? That's
it's Valo love, yes.
The tagline, exactly. Well, thank you, Vlad. I appreciate you having me on, and it's a real honor to be hanging out with Jamie online today too. I'm the VP of Client Engagement for AtBot, which is a no-code chatbot solution for the Microsoft Cloud, and Microsoft MVP for Office apps and services. And most people know me from my infographics, including I'm working on a wallpaper. I think I'm just going to duplicate it over and over, and really go full on with the periodic table wallpaper idea.
But I think you have one on groups that's like in height. It's built like that, right? So if you print them big enough size, you can like build a maze to cover all your wall with infographics.
Yeah, that could be super useful. Almost like the wallpaper Willy Wonka. We'll get some schnozberries out there too, and good to go.
Can you make it a Teams background?
I mean, I can do whatever is asked for.
For background blur. I'm surprised you haven't done that yet, to be honest.
I like my background. I spent too much money on this background to put blur in.
I get you on that one. Okay, so to actually get started, Matt, I think you actually prepared a presentation on the history of Teams, right?
Well, I mean, just kind of an overview of like the history of electronic communication. Let's not make people too excited and set expectations too high. But it's kind of a cool thing to look at how Teams came into place, essentially, and became sort of this new paradigm. So give me a second while I pull up and share my screen. And
by the way, for everybody watching, he hasn't shown this presentation to me before, even if I asked to.
I would never. Absolutely not.
So I can't wait to see it as well.
And I welcome all questions, all feedback, and all chop busting along the way, Vlad. Okay, so that's
perfect.
All right.
And I think, by the way, as the screen shows a bit dark for me, and until we have it on the screen, I think, Jamie, we had a giveaway for everybody that asked a question that Matt can't answer, right? Oops. I think Jamie's frozen again. Man, I think too many giveaways.
Because I know so little, apparently.
But yeah, Lyman, can you get Mac's screen on the Mac's desktop on the screen?
And my screen right now is black, so just heads up.
Yeah, maybe okay. Maybe put your face or put an infographic on the screen. So there you go. It's black now.
All right. Cool.
There we go.
Okay. So if you see some graphics coming in right now, that's where I want to be. You good?
Yeah.
You good?
Yeah.
Excellent.
All is good.
Excellent. Okay, so what I want to kind of talk about here is this new paradigm of collaboration and communication. Microsoft Teams is a really big deal these days, and for a lot of good reasons, but the entire sort of era of online messaging dates back to the 60s. So if you're not familiar with it, I'm going to deep dive into some super, arcane knowledge here. But 1960s.
Matt, give me a second. Lyman, I think we're hearing Matt twice. And I'm already having trouble with hearing Matt. I don't imagine other people having to hear him twice.
That would be terrible for them. Let me double check on my side that I'm hearing all the stuff is good.
And Vlad twice. Ouch. Imagine both of us twice, Matt. That must not be fun.
It's a lot of effort.
Okay, good now, I think.
Okay, cool.
We're good now.
All right, pause me if you need to. But the point here is that back in the 60s, this is when we first got introduced to online messaging. I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but the Advanced Research Project Agency, ARPA, which is now known as DARPA, Defense in front of that nowadays, they put together what we kind of talk about as being the origin of the internet, which is great, but actually for our sake, it's actually more notable that it was the first intranet, because it was a connection of a number of local universities across the country and defense locations. Now there were like 100, 200 nodes, users, and only like 20 or so nodes. So you had essentially the opportunity to start sending messages back and forth in real time that were not telegraphed. They were actually, electronic and not analog. And what's really cool about that is that you could connect to somebody from DC to Stanford, let's say. But it wasn't until the 70s that one of the guys that worked for one of the contractors there, his name is Ray Tomlinson, he actually went to the same college that I went to, though he was way smarter than me, came up with the idea of a mailbox. So instead of having to be like in the old AOL Instant Messenger days where you had to be online to chat with somebody, you could actually send a message to somebody back and forth. So that was 71, okay? It wasn't until 91 that Microsoft came out with MS Mail, both for Windows and Macintosh. And it wasn't until 97 that we really got Outlook as it was, or as we know it today, which is that combination of calendar mail, tasks, things like that.
I just wonder how many people from the chat actually played with like Microsoft Mail, for example, in 91. Did anybody use it?
I mean, anybody that would have lived through that era, this was a consumer application, so there's definite possibility of that. So we went from the early online messaging with ARPA to MS Mail in 91. That was a paradigm shift, right? That became available to real people, in the world. But then in 2016, that's when we got Microsoft Teams, right? Microsoft had to deal with, what do we do about Slack? That came out 3 years prior. Do we buy it? Do we build our own? And they decided to build their own. And that's a big deal because that's a new paradigm now, right? We've gone from email, where every single message you receive is essentially is equal in your inbox as long as it gets through the spam filter. So that really important email I got from my boss, and also that, request for me to fill out my expense report that I can do between now and the next month or so is equal as far as email is concerned. Both teams, you are able to basically arbitrarily categorize your messages, to follow only the topics that you care about, which is fantastic. So we've seen an amazing amount of growth with Teams. As of November, Microsoft acknowledged 20 million active users daily, which is a big deal. I know that people at Microsoft talk about monthly active usage a lot. I prefer DAU because if you're really trying to bring internal inbox to zero, you need to be talking about a daily action, not a monthly action. So 20 million people is huge. That being said, when you look at what Office 365 in general has, it's 10 times as many. So you have 200 million daily active users around the same time. And let's assume that every one of those users has an inbox, which is probably reasonably accurate. It wouldn't be super unconservative to assume that. So there's a huge gap there between the number of Teams users and the number of Office users and, let's say, inbox users. And we now have literally a half century of, I'll call it bad business etiquette, of sending emails with certain subject lines at certain times, requesting certain things, some typical phrasings that none of us actually like to see. And the one thing that I think everybody can relate to is the mistaken reply all. That actually took down the network at my first employee one time because somebody sent an email out to the entire organization of 15,000, Exchange on-prem, and everybody started replying with, please remove it from distribution, please remove it from distribution, and please stop replying all. The last email that said, please stop replying all, killed the system. We were down for the rest of the day.
Nice.
So for me, it's a big one on etiquette, and that's essentially what I'm going to be talking about at the conference. The SharePoint conference is good etiquette within this new paradigm, because we now have a half a century of lessons learned that is really, really good to take into the new paradigm and say, let's not do it the way that we did it in the past. I think there's a lot of opportunity to fill that gap, especially because there's so many users still to join Teams, especially in light of the COVID-19 in the last few weeks.
That's certainly been a topic, the coronavirus that's going around with everybody working remote. I think team usage, we're going to get some amazing stats about that. Team usage will go up. But if you actually go back a few slides, are you still sharing screen or no?
I can, yep.
Yeah, if you go back a few slides to when you had the number with the Teams daily active users and Office 365, do you happen to know how many users Skype for Business has? And I don't think that's something that Microsoft actually shares those days, since they kind of push everybody to Teams. But I personally really think that we're going to see that Teams number go up a lot with Skype for Business going away in a year.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Microsoft sort of has a guarantee of the number of users that are on at least Skype for Business Online, or at least a portion of them, to migrate over to Teams, because there is a migration path set forward. Microsoft is helping do that. I think there's a huge opportunity. So that gap on the very right end of this graph is going to, close up a little bit, especially because of Skype for Business retiring, but also just because we're seeing, advertising for that matter. Teams just put out their first commercial during the, I think it was the AFC Championship a few months ago. And I'm now actually seeing, Teams ads on Twitter, where for the last few years I've seen Zoom, GoToMeeting, all these things, all these advertisements in places like airports. And it's nice to now see that Teams is sort of really pushing hard on nope, this is our product and we're kicking butt with it.
And by the way, before we actually switch topics, I've been told, and Matt, I'm saying this with a lot of love, your graphic is wrong.
Why is that?
For for Microsoft 365 is 200 plus million monthly active users.
I will double check, but I'm almost positive that this was Office specific and it was 200 million daily. But
this comes from Dan Holm in the chat, so I wouldn't argue too much. I'm just saying.
All right, I'll double check. I thought it was his resource that I used, but man.
But let me just go back. You mentioned while you're presenting about actually getting to inbox zero and getting people to switch from the inbox to Teams. And I'll actually ask this one to Jamie. Do you actually think, and we've seen this with Yammer, Microsoft bought Yammer and relaunched it, let's say, and everybody was like, Yammer is going to kill inbox. And it never actually happened. And we had Teams, and Teams going to kill inbox. But I still wake up every morning with 30 emails in my inbox. Do you think that's still actual something that we want to achieve? Or since you work with both Teams and Yammer, how do you see this whole killing the inbox thing? You're on mute, by the way. Just so you know, before you explain too much.
Yeah, as I was saying, I think that Teams won't necessarily replace email completely, at least for where we're at right now. I wouldn't say that that's probable, but I think Teams can definitely steal some of the load. We know that. And I did a survey on this, I think it was a couple months ago, kind of comparing email and Teams, which is actually email and Teams and Yammer and the use cases between those. So Teams can kind of pull in those project related tasks and emails that are, hey, check out this deliverable, can you get back to me? And things like that. So these like specific use cases that are project related, but there's always going to be a case for email when it comes to like external sharing if you're not using that in Teams yet and things like that. So.
Okay, Matt, what do you think about that? Now that we talk about the topic of killing email, ever gonna happen or?
I don't think it's going to happen on the external side, but I think Teams is much more of an internal tool than it is an external tool, right? So email is a universal protocol, kind of like SMS, right? I can send an email to anybody's email account, right? I can't necessarily do that with Teams, at least not without doing guest sharing and whatnot. But I think on the inside, I think it's a goal. I think it's a legitimate goal for an organization to go forward to, which is to say, don't send emails internally because it's kind of pointless as long as you have your team information architecture set up correctly. And when you're going to send somebody a message, I don't see the value of an email any longer internally to ask somebody to do something or to send them information or share a file with them, because Teams is so much more user-friendly. It's built basically for all 4 of the major platforms from its birth, as opposed to having to try to make it, shoehorn it into being a mobile-friendly experience, or even just simple threading. I mean, no offense to Outlook, because Apple Mail and the Android and Gmail, for that matter, nobody's really figured out, in my opinion, how to thread email correctly without it having all the ugly back and forths in the past. Whereas the thread in Teams is just beautiful. It just works,
And now let's talk a bit about adoption. I think, Jamie, a tool that you've been using a lot and been passionate about is the Teams Advisor. Am I right?
Yeah.
Can you tell us, first of all, what the Teams Advisor is? I know I've heard the name a lot. I've seen tweets about it, but I don't think I've actually ever seen what it is. So can you first introduce it?
Yes. So Advisor for Teams is a tool that helps you deploy Teams in a way that's planned through Planner and Forms. So basically, we all have resources all over the place when we're rolling out Teams, and it's kind of a struggle to juggle all of those along with a project plan and this and that and all the resources to kind of schedule that and get to your end goal. So I might actually share my screen here.
Okay, Lyman, can we get Jamie's screen online?
Oh no.
I don't like that. Oh no.
Oh, you could hear that. It is freezing. I'm trying to get it up on a different laptop here.
Okay.
But we'll go ahead and give it.
Actually share a link as well in the chat for everybody. I hope it's the right one. And that's something that's currently in preview. Am I correct?
Yes, it's still in preview, but it is really useful already.
Awesome. Let's see, I think right now we still have the infographic by Matt with wrong numbers. Sorry, Matt, on it. I just had to.
I'll take the L on that. You're right. I looked it up. It's monthly.
I feel like there's a story there.
I think Teams is the only Microsoft 365 app that they're actually measuring as daily active users. And there was actually some jokes from Slack. I don't know if you guys are following, but the Slack and Teams, there's always this small war going on. And I think on an investor call or something, Slack actually just said that, yeah, Microsoft Teams has that many users just because admins force it to automatically open when the computer opens. So that's why they got so many numbers. And Microsoft then said, no, we actually only count if they send a message or if they do an action or something like that.
Yeah, it was real action was required to do the
message. But it was just funny, the reaction. The first time we had the daily active measurement that was shared, there's a lot of tough love from Slack that was that was done.
Yeah, they weren't very nice about it either, with some like public tweets and blog posts, as far
Yeah.
as I remember.
I see we got your screen up right now, so
And you have to be a global admin to deploy it. So if you don't have access to that, you'll have to contact your admin here. But what you get with each channel is a planner that contains everything that you need. Practice, it's not missing any steps when you come to like early adopters, pilot users, network readiness, and all that. And they recently just added these categories to it. So,
ooh, so like labels.
yeah. And so when you're in the charts and scheduling reporting, you can actually sort by these labels, assign by these labels and stuff like that.
That's legit. Very cool.
Have
lot
you
of
used
lot of red.
a lot of red?
As is tradition.
Those are all
Have you?
math tasks.
Yeah, right.
Uh,
Still working on it. I'll get back to you.
Everything
I'll
that's
assign it.
red, just assign it to Matt.
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
He's used to it.
We'll be real, guys.
Have you used this? Like, how do clients actually? Because
I mean,
I love the
I
idea. I love that
for a
for a
smaller company, a lot of this stuff is already built. But for big organizations, do they actually rely on this, or do they just copy and paste some of it, part of their like bigger process?
So it is still new, I would say, like within the past couple months or so. It just got announced around Ignite. I haven't used it personally. I haven't had a chance yet. But I think so. The way I can explain it is this is, you have the Microsoft provided templates that are, the communication plan, the project plan, all within these templates. And it actually kind of follows all these steps in here, but the planner lays it out for you in the schedule format and it's planner. Planner beats project any day.
Planner is a lot easier than project. We'll
It
agree
is.
on that. But
100%.
project can do so many more things. I love Planner, but sometimes it's tough to actually do a full project with requirements and things like that. Actually, off-topic question. How do you guys organize tasks in Planner? Do you have like a to-do, doing, done, or do you have them per topic and then you manage it inside of the task where you're at?
So I've done both, and I think it kind of depends on the preference of the team. But I've seen it, I've done the to-do in progress, deliverables, and kind of sorted out like that. But I've seen both ways.
Okay, how about you, Matt?
I second everything Jamie said.
Okay, then you can go back on mute. I'll ask more questions to Jamie then. So if we look at that plan, is governance and implementing governance anywhere on there? Because I've seen this
Yeah.
becoming a big topic for a lot of organizations.
Yeah, so everything in here is from adoption to governance to network readiness. So it really is missing nothing. And these labels in here kind of split that into the different categories. But let me find one for adoption. Okay, here we go. And each one has these subtasks. So everything in here Yeah, and that's not a good one. I have a better example, I think. You know what? Let's jump over to the other one. This is a bigger plan for meetings and conferencing, so they have a little bit more examples.
Okay, so there's one board per channel, let's say.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So each workload, and I can show you guys screenshots in a little bit, but each workload is like one click of a button in the Teams admin center. So it does everything for you, and each goes into a channel.
That's really awesome.
Yeah,
But
that's super helpful.
Mm-hmm.
especially, and I mean, personally, I see myself taking a lot of it and putting it like, how you always have to do that Word document that everybody like, you could deliver it in Planner, but a lot of companies still want it in Word or as a PDF somewhere or in a PowerPoint. Copy pasting from this and putting it in the delivery method that you like, I think it's super useful for that as well.
Yeah. Well, and you can attach files to this. So what I've done, we used Planner with the previous company I was consulting with. We did use Planner to roll out Teams. And what we did was in the Planner task, we had in progress, deliverables, and stuff like that. And we would just upload the file to Teams and then go ahead and link it in the Planner task. So I go into my task and there I have the document that I'm working on. It makes it look way better too.
Awesome. Now let's continue on a bit with the governance talk. First of all, do you see IT, especially now with kind of the self-service, everybody can create a team, everybody can create a private channel by default. Do you guys see IT a bit turning off some of the features for governance concerns? I'll start with Jamie, maybe.
Okay.
Matt was like,
okay, so governance is definitely, obviously it's going to be huge with any Microsoft 365 workload, but with Teams, it's so important because everything behind it is Office 365 groups. So you have to think about, the naming conventions, you have to think about everything that goes along with that. And so definitely when you're rolling it out, those are kind of the big decisions. So is it going to be self-service? Is it going to be, is there going to be a naming convention and things like that?
Yeah, and that's something, I don't know if, actually before, Matt, what kind of governance features do you see most companies actually adopting?
I think there is definitely a, default scared reaction from IT organizations, especially in bigger companies, and because they do want to sort of turn off the whole self-service aspect of things because they're really worried about too much stuff being created and not being managed, right? It's just going to die or live empty forever. And one thing I tell people, especially when I'm talking about Office 365 groups, because this isn't just Teams, right? The whole group concept is SharePoint, it's Planner, it's Yammer, it's Outlook, it's a whole bunch of different applications. That just because there's an empty container and it exists doesn't mean that you should be scared of it. I know, in the on-prem world, it was definitely something that made us really itchy. And I kind of tell people like, get over that itch because you have bigger things to worry about. So I think a correct governance application is give people some control, because even if you wanted to stop them from creating Office 365 groups, I think it was, I don't remember exactly who came up with it, but there was a blog post out there that identified something like 37 different entry points into creating a group within Office 365. So even if you turn off 5 of them, you still have 32 left that other people could find or, stumble across or just know how to get to. So I generally say, yep, keep it so that it's open, let people do what they have to do, make sure they know how they're doing it, because successful governance a lot of times just comes down to good education and good adoption training. And then have some sort of sunset process for each of these things. So if they're not touched for 6 months, have it automatically be deleted or set into some sort of archive mode, so that those people that do own that are going to get pinged and say, hey, you haven't touched this in 6 months. Do you actually need this any longer? And I think that really helps big organizations get over that whole itchiness of, oh man, this is going to blow up into something huge. And my response is, 1, don't worry about it. You're not paying per container. So if it's empty, you didn't pay for it. You're getting it as a subscription model, so you can do whatever you want. And 2, just have it sunset, and then I'll light a fire under your users' behinds to get back into the thing if they use it, or confirm that they're not using it, and then kind of put it to bed.
Do you see most, and actually I'll keep on going with Matt, because if not he'll say whatever Jamie says. So I want to put Matt on the spot here. do you see most organizations actually leveraging the Microsoft built-in controls, so lifecycle management, access reviews, things like that to manage that, or a lot of them going to third-party products for groups governance?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of both. I always like to try to push out what they have access to based on what they're already paying for, just to try to maximize their investment in the cloud subscription that they have. But yeah, there's definitely going to be success within the the partner field out there that build products for this and do things like that. I think if I've worked with that organization, I've generally tried to push them towards get the most out of the system that you have and try not to pay extra if you don't need to. But if the pay extra really saves you a lot of money overall and, IT, I don't know, having some sort of manual approval or provisioning process internally, then yeah, you probably shouldn't have that. You probably want it to be, automated. But if you're a small organization, that person's time may actually be worth less than what the automation process is, to be, frank. So yeah, it's definitely both directions.
That reminds me of, like the funny jokes that I need a super complicated approval to buy a software for $5,000, but I can call in a meeting with 30 people for 1 hour without anything needed at all, which ends up costing a lot more.
Yeah.
How about you, Jamie? And by the way, I see the message here that you can stop screen sharing and restart your camera because it looks a bit frozen again. But while you do that as well, we'll keep it audio only. What do you see organizations using between out-of-the-box lifecycle management and governance features or third-party partner tools?
Yeah, is my camera on now? Are we good?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, like Matt, I'll just say what Matt said. It's a little bit of both. Yes.
Hashtag ditto.
That's my answer for everything.
I'll need to find tougher question that you guys don't agree on.
Well, it's like that's the classic answer. It depends, right? It's always the correct answer.
Yeah.
Especially so there's forms and flow and all these things that make it so easy. So if you do have those requirements, you can easily build something, I would say, low code, no code. So
it's Power Automate, not Flow anymore. Be careful.
Yes. Power Automates with an S.
But you can see Jamie's a consultant. The default answer is it depends.
It pays our bills, man. I don't know what's so wrong with that.
I think a lot of it comes down to if the company already has the Azure AD Premium or not, because and you guys do a lot of it more than me, but I think most of those features are Azure AD P1 or even P2 for a lot of them, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point. That it does require the Azure AD Premium license, so especially with the group's naming policy. I think that's the big one for sure.
Yeah.
So.
How about for guest access? I actually forgot, but do you have to pay if you have if you use premium features? Do you still have to pay for guest, or is that still fully free for guest? Or I know there's a little number or something that you had to look at if you use premium features.
I'm gonna turn that one to Matt. I don't believe so. I
don't think so either. I guess the beauty of this cloud ecosystem is that nobody has the answer to everything. But I'm pretty sure that guest access is just included without any sort of premium features. I guess my comment too on the P1 or the Azure AD Premium is I mentioned that I try to keep my organizations into the SKU that they're in so they can get the most out of it. But at the same time, as opposed to purchasing a third-party product, which only offers you, whatever it comes with, that elevation to Azure Premium comes with a lot of other features, which can be a major win if they want to include that in their future rollouts or even currently and go, hey, by the way, you now have X, Y, and Z, which you didn't have before, in addition to naming. But yeah, guest access is a huge one. That is a major section of any governance that I put together or, proposal for a customer because do you want it to be that any team can be shared externally? Do you want to have a little quarantine space where there's only one space for people to put things that are shareable externally? Do you want it to be right in Teams? Do you want it to be a little more feature friendly or feature robust, I guess, in SharePoint only? That's a big question, and it really comes down to what are the security guys thinking? What do the CXOs think? A lot of times it really just comes down to how comfortable they feel. And which, can be good or bad, especially because a lot of times they'll say, nope, we can't do it. It's too much of a security risk. And, I come back to the standard, well, that's stopping somebody from emailing an attachment, and you might as well shut down Exchange Online as well, which at that point they kind of roll their eyes at me and say, "Urgh," but they know that I have a point.
Internet. Just shut down the whole internet.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and I think with the premium, you're talking about shutting down Exchange Online, but with some of the premium ones, especially with sensitivity labels now rolling out that you can apply it to an Office file, you can apply that this cannot be shared externally, and that will include Exchange Online as well. So
Yeah.
that unification of security with the premium Azure AD licenses is pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's talk a bit about private channels. I know, Matt, and I'll start with you again this time. You had pretty strong feelings on private channels. I remember it was a bit last year. It's not recent, but last year there were some nice Twitter threads going on with you as the author. What do you think about private channels, Matt? Tell us how you really feel.
I was actually going to pass that to him and say the exact same thing.
I don't have strong opinions. What do you mean?
That's a heated subject for Matt.
So I think that private channels blow away the entire concept of Teams as a simple collaborative experience that doesn't require super hardcore training, period. That being said, I toe the party line because people want it, they're going to get it, now they need to know how to use it. And it's kind of one of those, you asked for it, here's how it's going to be done type of things. And the way that they implemented it is the only good way that you could have implemented it. So the fact that, membership of a private channel needs to also be membership of the team to start with, because the whole membership aspect of groups is a thing. And then the file management where it creates a separate SharePoint site for it, because if otherwise the owner of the team would have access. And if that person is just, I don't know, is just a member of the team and the team and Teams, they're totally separate levels. There is no concept of a channel in the Teams, world in Slack itself. So I think people are looking for some sort of really, really simple way to do it, and there's not, because if you want it to be part of that membership group, you have to have it done this way. I think it makes sense. I think it's totally usable as long as you know what you're doing. And I, always kind of tell people in my sessions at conferences or when I'm consulting, channels don't make one unless you really feel you need it. Convince yourself first. Don't default to making a new channel. Because it's not like a folder in shared drive or SharePoint where it's just click a button and go for it, no big deal. That's a problem when it comes to finding information, knowledge management, that kind of thing. With Teams, the fewer the channels, generally speaking, I think the better. And if you need to get into private channels, just remember that you're kind of jumping into that whole scenario where we were in starting 10, 15 years ago in SharePoint, where permissions of, local permissions of different folders and files or object level permissions became a nightmare to manage. And that's what we're going to get into with private channels. So that's my view, is that simplicity of Teams just being, here's a whole bucket of stuff. You all have access. You can all edit it. And it's beautiful because we don't have to worry about, managing permissions with it. And we get over that whole, decade and a half of how do I get to the right thing and who do I give access to when they start in a project or when they start working for us. So I think private channels can be really good if you use them correctly, but you have to use them correctly. And there's a lot of good resources out there now for getting you there.
I like before you started, you said, first of all, I don't have any strong feelings on this, but how about you, Jamie? Will you say everything what Matt said? Do you agree with it all, or?
Yeah, yes and no. And I could totally relate to Matt with the unique permissions. I come from that world and I totally agree. But at the end of the day, Office 365 groups are a membership service. That's, the way that they're actually defined that way. And I think I can relate to the reason that Microsoft wanted to make this available, because I feel like if they didn't want to, they wouldn't have, but there was such an argument for it on Userverse and all that. But it comes down to, I think that they recommend a larger team versus a smaller team. So more channels versus less channels and more teams. So I think that kind of played a part in that too. So.
Yeah, you can't argue with 26,000 upvotes on user voice. That I cannot deny that. And you're right.
I don't think you would win that battle.
a lot of it comes down to the IA. Do you want to have more teams? And people are saying, yeah, but there's so many teams, and of course it depends. And I hate always defaulting to that because it's true though. But I've always came back with, well, creating a new team is super easy. You can get rid of it if you need to. It's all just one membership group. And if you start permission protecting these channels, now you have essentially little mini teams within each team. And is that really what you want? Does that make things better for you? Especially since now you can pin channels. Like, did you really need to have or be worried about, having 30 teams as opposed to 5 teams with 15 channels each or something? But it's always going to come down to who's asking, what their use case is, and how adamant they are about, I need this private concept, and we're going to move forward with it because that's what I told you we're going to do.
No strong feelings. Okay, so now I want to see your face as I say this. There's actually on user voice, there is a request for channel-only members and guests that has about 3,000 votes. That's basically being a member of only a channel, but not of the team itself. Do you have stronger feelings about that one?
So I feel like if we've already broken the seal, you might as well go with all the features that are being requested. And I think that's actually a really good use case. One of the kind of little mini life hacks I give people with teams is, hey, let's say you have a team where you're working on an RFP or something, and you send out a request for proposal to potential vendors, and they want to send in their proposals. Well, instead of sending some central, email address that they all come into and somebody has to fan through them, send them the email address to the channel for each of those vendors so people can discuss all the things coming in, and they don't know what that email address does. They don't know that it goes to Teams, and just kind of forward it that way. And then taking that next step forward, which you're asking about, basically a super private channel that has, or double private channel that has membership that's not within the team itself. That's really useful because in that situation, you could actually invite those people into that channel from vendor 1, vendor 2, and vendor 3, and they can't see the other channels to that vendor, those other vendors, or who their competition is, which I think has a lot of value. In fact, I think it has a little more value than the private channels as they were created beforehand, because I definitely see that aspect of customers, vendors, other people that you have to partner with, things like that, without them having to know who else is in that team. I think there's value there. And again, if we already broke the seal, we might as well do the whole thing,
I would counter that argument. I think, well, how would you deal with the security with that? That's just my concern. So
I mean, the security, the security's super complex though, right?
Yeah. But then it's like you have the unique document library, and then you have the unique folder permissions, and then you have the unique item permissions, and that turned into a nightmare.
Well, I mean, you already got a unique site at this point.
Right.
There's a whole site collection. Might as well give them a whole tenant and just nest it from there.
There you go.
I actually have a question here from the chat from Fred18. Do you guys know if we're going to get the ability to move channels between teams? And first of all, do you think it's a good idea? Have you guys seen needed at clients? And have you heard of any feature about that? Well, let's start with Jamie, actually.
Yeah, I've gotten questions about it for sure. I think that where it becomes a problem is with the conversations. So you can't really move those easily. But I do think that it's coming. I think they're going to make it happen.
I'm always looking at user voice and they say, oh, wow, 13,000 votes.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has major use cases.
So people took an extra step.
Yeah. I think it's definitely justifiable. There's a need for it, and especially since we're already used to dragging and dropping, document libraries or folders within the document library. What is a channel but the team version of a document library or folder, essentially? I think it just comes down to how does Exchange Online, because I think it's Exchange that deals with chat, with the conversations in Teams itself. So it comes down to how do you move that stuff around. But I'm not an Exchange expert, and I don't claim to be.
So then you have the version history of editing a chat, and it just kind of goes down the rabbit hole from there.
Yeah, that's true.
So having actually I just did a Pluralsight course on it, which is in editing now, but I had to go super deep on where actually is. So Teams conversations are actually stored in Azure first and copied into the Exchange mailbox for compliance. So this way, when you actually run all of your compliance stuff, it runs them against Exchange Online because they're hidden. They're in a hidden folder inside there.
That makes sense.
But the main storage is still Azure.
Isn't private chat that goes to Skype somehow?
Well, so a lot of it still
places.
uses Skype APIs in the back, right?
Gotcha.
So if you look at all of the different, for example, messaging policies, right? That we have in Teams. Like I want to block, let's say, I want to block private channels at the tenant level. That's actually all still Skype for Business APIs in the back, which is still kind of funny. But all of the calling, all of the messaging policies is all Skype for Business. And yeah, I've had quite a bit of fun testing everything out and like trying to explain it to a normal user that if you have the default channel, you have this set of settings. If you have a standard channel, you have a different set of settings. If you have a private channel, now you have a lot more settings that you can do. It's been pretty fun.
And this is why you don't sleep.
That's why I don't sleep. It's Microsoft 365, Call of Duty, and then that restarts all over again. That's all.
Yes, right.
Same.
I see we have about 12 minutes left. What is one new feature in Teams that got launched recently that excites you guys? And I'll start with Jamie.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with tagging. I think that's really exciting. For those who are not familiar, basically you can create tags. It's actually really straightforward. You just go in the team settings as an owner and create a tag, which is basically like a group of people that you can use to mention a group of people. So I think that's great. You can use it as, a cashier's group or developers group or just unique kind of little buckets of people like that. And it avoids the channel mentioning and team mentioning that kind of fills up our notifications.
We're actually just started using it internally at Valo because, and I'm not sure. I mean, I think a lot of companies have the same thing where you have a team, you have a channel per department, but when you want to mention, like say the marketing team in a post in another channel, you just tag that channel name. But if 30 other people are in that channel and have it shown, it's going to notify all of them, not only the actual team. So I think that's going to be super cool. I'm not sure. Have you guys seen this usage kind of somewhere else, or is it only us?
With tagging?
Yeah, like when people tag channels instead of the actual team before tagging was invented.
Yeah. Well, and it's default for the notifications, right? So you're going to get, it's not like following. But I'll pass that on to Matt.
Yeah, I'm big on please don't over notify me if you don't have to. And that's one of the, best practices I push really hard on is, did you know you have like 15 different drop-down options for the different notifications on both devices, your desktop and mobile? So make sure that they're all honed to be correct, because if you don't want to follow a channel, just unfollow the channel and you'll see no more notifications about it, which is one of the reasons I love Teams so much, because if that were an email and I was CC'd, again, it's just as equal as the last email that was relevant to the thing that I'm actually working on today. So I think those are major wins. I think tags came out because it tags more of a membership, right, identity where you're just grabbing onto the right people that are associated there. The other kind of, I'll say life hack is the hashtag concept doesn't really exist in Teams yet, which is something that a lot of Slack users have asked for. And if there's two things that people coming from Slack will complain about and say that Teams is just totally unusable because it's hashtags, which you can still use hashtags and you can just search the hashtag. So as long as you're using it, it's going to pop up.
But you can't click on
even
it,
if it's not,
right?
I don't even think, I think it's like shown up as like clickable, but it doesn't actually do anything. I could be wrong on that. I haven't tried it in a while. And the other is, of course, we don't have enough reactions because it has to be the entire emoji set. And if I can't party parrot at work, I clearly can't do my job. It's sort of my viewpoint on, people coming from Slack. And I use Slack on a regular basis. Don't tell anybody. With some other organizations that I keep in contact with. But I think to actually answer your question, I think my favorite new feature recently is definitely pinned channels. I can be a simple man once in a while, and in this case, I am a simple man, and I just like having my top 10 things that I want to follow and keep my other teams below and hide them, and I get to them if I need to.
That's awesome. And to tell you a funny story, you know how the feature is called tags, right? The tagging feature. And of course, as every other IT pro, I'm a simple man. I don't read documentation. So I went into a test team, I created a tag, and then I go in the message and I put hashtag, and I'm like, how come it doesn't appear like a hashtag?
That's an interesting point.
Shouldn't I do hashtag and it appear here? What's not working? Let me actually write it out, see if it works. No, then I actually, okay, let me look at the documentation for this thing, and then it made sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was not my proudest moment there.
Yeah, same. And the hashtag thing, that kind of, goes through a bunch of, like, people have, there have been a number of requests for Microsoft To Do to support hashtags, because Wunderlist used to do it and To Do doesn't. And it's super easy to just put a hashtag in a task, or even the name of a list or something, or a sub list. And all you have to do is search the hashtag, as long as you spell it correctly. So yeah, it's not a clickable thing, but it's going to bring up your search results. So I don't know, life pro tip there is hashtags work if only because you're searching for a very, very unique set of characters, and just go forward with it and be happy,
Do you think the hashtag conversation is there because team search, let's be, at least personally, that might be a personal opinion, I'm still having trouble finding a lot of stuff in Teams. Like I'm searching for stuff, and maybe because there's so much content in there and not all the filters are there yet, but do you think, is it because of that, or what is the main reason for hashtags?
Oh, I think a lot of it comes to people that are migrating over from Slack. They just expect the functionality exists someplace else, so they just expect it on this platform as well. And that's sort of the, I don't know, very simple answer, but I think it's the answer. And then, people are used to it if they use Twitter, if they use Facebook or things like that. But I don't know, it's like a nice little way to get around having to search for, I don't know. You're not going to get a gray area fuzzy search when you use a hashtag, right? It's strictly that. If you misspell it, that's your own problem, and it's not going to pop up. But I think it really comes down to Slack users coming to Teams and saying, I can't do hashtags. And it's like, you can. It works.
But you can't click on them, yeah.
You can't click on them, yeah.
How about you, Jamie? Have you seen requirements for hashtag in your customers? What's the main reason for it?
Yeah, what Matt said, basically. But where I get concerned is there's kind of like a fine line between Yammer hashtags and Teams hashtags. So it's all about defining the use cases. So
That's true. That's a good point, because Yammer has the functionality.
Yeah. I thought I heard somewhere that they were coming out with hashtags, though. I don't remember. That might be fake news. But
it has 5,000 evokes on user voice.
Yeah.
And it says on the backlog, so it might be coming.
Okay. It was months ago, I think, that I heard that. Maybe I was thinking of tags, though. It was a while back.
They actually added it on the backlog on February 13, 2020. So added on the backlog quite recently. I'm always joking, and it's funny if Dan is still on the call in the chat, that now with all of the Microsoft people working from home and being forced to use Teams, we're going to have a bunch of new feature ideas and stuff like that will come out of it. The Teams roadmap will be full of things for remote workers.
No comment.
I said features. I never said bug fixes. But I see we have about 4 minutes left. So just to try to finish on time, let's talk a bit about the sessions that you guys have at the SharePoint conference in Vegas. And let's start with Matt. You're going to be speaking about Teams, but what exactly?
So I'm going to be talking about etiquette. So this is everyday user level good practices in Teams. And that was sort of where I was going with the initial charts that I was showing that were all horribly wrong, clearly.
You got 3 months.
I know. I do have some time to fix it. That's a very, and plus they might be new numbers since until then. But I've been lucky enough to work with my employer AtBot, but also partnering with AvePoint, putting together an etiquette guide. And it's basically just a nice little booklet to give out to people and show off some of the basics on how to create a channel, what type of channels you should use, what comes with a new team, when you should mention a whole channel versus the whole team, or using a tag, that kind of thing. And it really, to me, is one of those things, just like I said earlier, which is we've had a half century of bad practices in email. This is our opportunity to actually start training people, nip it in the bud from the beginning, and move forward with sort of a best practice mindset. A lot of people would call this like a tips and tricks session. It very much is, but I really kind of look at it bigger than that. It's really coming down to business professional experiences within Teams, plus a little dab of governance, because the sessions at SharePoint conference are a little longer than some of the others, so we can talk a little bit about naming convention, private channels, some of the other updates like that.
That's really cool. How about you, Jamie? What are you going to be talking about?
Yeah, so mine will be pretty similar to that. It's going to be about rolling out Teams to very large enterprises. So kind of key insights that we learned from that. It was a year process, and then it was about 2 months that it took to roll out globally. So Fortune 500, and we're going to walk through probably advisor a little bit. I'll touch on probably at the end, but yeah, the key insights, kind of what lessons learned, what KPIs we measured, adoption resources and champions and stuff like that. So
that's really cool. It's gonna be cool to see the real thing from experiences from an actual deployment in real life.
Yeah. And it was recent too in January. So
case
awesome.
studies are super valuable.
And I also heard, I don't know if it's true or not, that in real life, she's not frozen with a permanent smile on, like with Skype. So it's
could have been a worse
more
freeze picture, though, definitely.
Am I still frozen? I have something to show. If we can go 2 minutes over.
Yeah, we can. Let me check with Lyman here. But yeah, your camera has been frozen, I think, for the last 15, 20 minutes. In a really funny, I think we should have taken a few screenshots. Oh, yeah, I do have at least one of them.
I need a new profile picture. Just send it over.
Let me screenshot only that for now.
That's funny.
My computer is clearly biased against.
Oh, now you're back.
I stopped video and turned it back on again.
Oh,
No,
there we go.
Me though.
She's alive. She's moving. It was not a bot.
But should we go over this before I cut out again?
Yeah, sure. Do you want to talk a bit about
that?
Ooh.
No? You do giveaway.
I have that too, but I'm not giving mine away.
Well, I have an extra copy. I would never give mine away, ever.
All right.
No, but really, this is Adopt and Embrace for Microsoft Teams, Adopt and Embrace Microsoft Teams, and it's written by a bunch of amazing people. And it's probably the most valuable book I've ever read on Teams and Microsoft 365, I would say, as far as an adoption perspective. So we're going to do a giveaway. And this was, what was it, Vlad? It was every answer that Matt got wrong. Every time he said depends, that could work too.
Ooh,
I don't know.
So
200 million daily active users is a pretty big gaffe on my part.
Honestly, yeah, I think Dan Holm, in theory, would be the clear winner of that. But I'm not sure if he needs that copy, but man, pointing you out on the wrong numbers, and then you even said, I have to check my source. It's not looking good for your MVP renewal, Matt. That's all I'm going to say.
I'll just keep polishing this one over and over.
I see, I think, here we go. We actually got, I think Fred 18 was the one that was the most interactive during the session. So I think Fred 18 should be the winner.
Agreed.
Now I have no idea how you're going to ship it, Jamie, but let's check with Lyman. Maybe an email address where Fred can send his information that maybe, Lyman, you can collect that. I don't want to put pressure on you, Lyman, but you kept blaming everything on me, so have.
Can I mention Fred in the chat? Oh, it will. Got it.
Yes. There you go, Fred. Jamie will continue the chat with you, but since we're 1 minute overdue, let's actually, first of all, can you have thank you, both of you, for your time today. I know you're both super busy, so thank you for taking an hour out of your day to share your knowledge to the community. I'm sure everybody appreciates it a lot. And I'm looking forward to see you in Vegas or even before that.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vlad. Jamie, good chatting with you. Long time no see. Haven't seen you since Florida. It was a good time.
We'll see you in Vegas, though.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And now, before we talk about the guest for next week, let's go into a quick promo video about the SharePoint conference.
Why should people come to SharePoint Conference? Well, first of all, to learn, of course. You get to hear about all the exciting announcements about what's upcoming and innovations in the product.
People meet technology, and we can learn all about what's happening in the future of SharePoint and what's happened in the past, and learn from each other and teach each other, and also engage with each other.
Putting all of that connection and wealth of technology together makes SharePoint Conference a really unbelievable event.
The people who I've met here that have helped me over the last 11 years of my journey are actual friends of mine. I can go to them for help about career planning, about technical issues, or about deployment challenges that I'm having.
This is a great place to get your questions answered. You've got a lot of speakers that are here to talk about all different kinds of topics that are related to the SharePoint framework.
Ask questions, stay curious.
I would say SharePoint Conference is for everyone.
I think if you are using SharePoint or contemplating using SharePoint, you should be here.
Conferences like this cover the width and breadth of SharePoint, and so you get exposed to things that you didn't know that even existed, or you see things you knew existed in a different light.
For me, attending SharePoint Conference, it's more about create the community, meeting the people I've known for many years, but also meet new people, engage with new people.
Ends up being a really good environment to just network with other like-minded people.
Getting to just hear stories and understand how other people use SharePoint, it's a whole other level that you get when you come here.
I can't imagine not coming to the SharePoint conference every year. As soon as they announce the date, it gets blocked out in my calendar. It is the event to go to.
It is an amazing conference, and you should be here, and you're the only thing that's missing.
Welcome back, everyone. So let's talk a bit about next week. Next week, I'm personally going to be, well, I was supposed to be traveling, but finally some of the plans changed. So we actually have a super host for next week, which is Caruana. She was here as a guest on SharePoint TV late last year. And the topic is going to be about diversity and inclusion in general, and also, of course, talk about the diversity and inclusion track at SharePoint Conference 2020. So it's an amazing topic and super important topic. Caruana is an amazing host, so I'm sure you guys will have fun, and I'm sure a little break from my voice will be good for 1 week. Everybody will be happy about that. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Don't forget to follow SharePoint TV on Twitch by clicking the heart on the top right of your screen. And looking forward to see you here next week. I won't be here, but in 2 weeks. So thank you very much, everybody.